Welcome, MP Turnbull. We really appreciate your leadership and taking the time to do this interview with us today.
Thanks, Blessed. Nice to see you and great to be here.
As always, we also want to begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we are on, as well as our ancestors and those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We like to acknowledge our elders and the community stewards whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we build and share for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So again, I want to thank you so much for being here, MB Turnbull, and please go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners and let them know about the remarkable work that you do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Turnbull, and I've been a member of Parliament since 2019, and before that was a social entrepreneur and CEO of a consulting company that helped social entrepreneurs across Canada. My background was originally in ethics and philosophy. Grew up in Brampton originally, and had some great cultural experiences by living in other countries in the world, in particular South Korea, for about 3 years. And that was a really great experience for me. I've traveled a lot and done a lot of work in social innovation. I think the two formative experiences for me when I was growing up were one, when I was really young, about 15 years old, I took some leadership training that really was impactful on me as a youth. It made me really want to give my life in service of others and look for ways to make a difference at every turn. So it's the reason I studied philosophy and ethics. It's the reason I traveled. It's the reason I taught at universities. It's the reason I opened my company years later. And all of that led me to have this sort of fever for social innovation and social finance. And so I can say a lot more about that. It's also what led me into politics. Funny enough that I really saw that the federal government was moving forward with the strategy, the social innovation, social finance strategy for Canada, and that lit me up. Like, really made me feel committed to, wanting to get involved in federal politics, which I had never really thought that I would do in my life. So from running a company that did over 350 projects with social entrepreneurs and social innovators across Canada to jumping into federal politics, it's really been a learning curve since 2019. But I think we're making some progress on key areas that I'm certainly passionate about. And I know probably many of your listeners, Blessed, are passionate about as well.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely something we share here. So really appreciate your background diversity. And of course, you're a Brampton native, as you mentioned earlier. Can you share what your personal mission and vision is?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my vision has always been to build a more equitable and sustainable economy for all Canadians, and part of that is kind of become part of the key message of the government these days. So I feel very values aligned with the current governing party in this country, and that's why I'm a member of the Liberal Party. But for me, I really want to see us think about systems change and really modify the systems that we have, including the economy, which is a key driver of a lot of, I think, both the challenges we experience and the opportunities that are there for us. And I think we can realign that system to incorporate social and environmental value and value the impact that businesses can have and that innovators can have in bringing about the kinds of changes that we want to see so that we get an actual more equitable, inclusive, diverse, and sustainable. I mean, I think the planet, the footprint we have on this planet is so important to our ability to thrive, that we need to really be more mindful of that. So there's a whole bunch of things that fit into that vision that are strategies about how to get there. But generally, like, that's what I've given my life. That's what lights me up. That's what I dream about at night. It's what I socialize about. It's what I think that I can make a difference, is to help build that more sustainable economy. And that's what I've, given many years of my life to.
I really appreciate that. So how important is research and innovation in your work?
Well, in my immediate work, in the work of many others right across our economy, right across our society, it's exceptionally important. I mean, to me, um, research, I was I was the CEO of a consulting company. We did research. I kind of did research for a living. But we looked at it in a different way. Like we didn't just look at it as kind of academic research. We looked at it as engagement and mobilization, and really looked at how research actually creates conversations and builds momentum towards change. So, it's like participatory action research. It wasn't just someone sitting at a desk doing some work and looking in the catalog of a library. It was having conversations and bringing people into conversations where they then saw themselves as active agents of change, where they would, creatively look at a system and create a theory of change together, with people that had very different views in the system that they operated in. And then they came to some consensus around the key levers and ways in which they want, so you think about children's nutrition, or gender-based violence prevention, or housing affordability, or reconciliation in Indigenous communities. All of these different areas of work, there were people at various different levels and positions within a system. And what we found through our work was that we needed all of their perspectives. We need all of their buy-in. We needed a theory of change that they all bought into in order for them all to feel a part of the process moving forward. Sometimes we talk about collective impact, and the idea of it being like a symphony. And there's many different actors, there's many different notes resonating in a symphony, in a piece of music that you think, wow, like this makes my soul ring. And there's a reason for that, because I think that systems change is very much like coordinating a symphony. And there's no one kind of orchestrator of that. It's got to be a group, it's got to be a collective process that needs to be inclusive. The innovation process is even more exciting, because that happens within that collective process, and that's something that I'm happily feel like became a specialist in through practicing this with large groups and facilitating those processes. And now I get to apply that to the work that I'm doing internally in the federal government. And Asian, we talk about rapid prototyping, and we talk about sense making, and there's lots of different tools of how to innovate. But I think the key for me, it always starts with the sort of fundamental and philosophy that I learned early on in my first years at Carleton, was that you can't solve a problem by looking at it in the same way. That in a way the problem is stated in terms that make it irresolvable, just in virtue of how the problem came to be. So otherwise it wouldn't be a problem. So you actually have to reframe problems together, and then do that collectively. And that's how you come up with really innovative solutions that get at the root causes, is to reframe problems and to do that together as a group. And that's tough work, but it's a lot of fun too.
Absolutely. So do you have a key set of priorities that you're working on right now?
Oh yeah, I've always got a long list of priorities. I'm the member of parliament for Whitby, so I have a long list of priorities for my community, and I'm working on those. But in addition to that, I'm very ambitious on Parliament Hill. So I'm, working on a private members bill right now, which will help essentially align our financial system with our climate targets. We have a $120 billion investment gap across our economy right now. In order to get to net zero, we need to essentially have another 120 roughly $1 billion per year go into all kinds of green investments. I was really happy that I worked really hard with lots of other people across the country, including members of SETC, but many others across Canada in the ecosystem, to launch the Social Finance Fund. And that was a big win this year that we finally got that launched. And I know that it will grow and develop, and it probably needs to continue to develop in multiple ways, so we can certainly have a healthy critique of how it rolls out. But I think the fact that we finally got it launched is a big hurdle. It's a big milestone. But another one of my priorities is the Sustainable Finance Forum 2023. So we had the inaugural one last year. We had 60 speakers, over 200 participants. We had the Prime Minister come and speak. We had all the cabinet ministers, almost every single one of them came out to speak. And we really advanced the conversation and elevated the awareness on Parliament Hill among parliamentarians, including MPs and senators across Canada, that participated in 2 days worth of meetings. And that was really beneficial. I found that very fulfilling, having organized that. And this year it's going to be much bigger. It's going to be held at the Shaw Center. There should be, I think last year we had about 200 to 250 participants. This year, I think we'll double that in size pretty safely. We're organizing speakers. We have an advisory committee that's helping organize, and we're having it at a bigger venue. So that's very exciting, and that's to elevate the conversation around sustainable finance, whether it's more debt financing for small to medium-sized enterprises that are trying to make impact, whether it's Indigenous-led businesses or Black-owned-led businesses. There are many facets of this conversation that we're trying to bring the two, the climate finance and the social finance conversation together, and really galvanize support for more momentum on Parliament Hill so that we can do some big things to set in motion what I hope to be mainstreaming sustainable finance in Canada. I mean, that's, to me, if we're going to achieve the things that I believe we need to achieve as a country, which is, again, greater equity and inclusion and diversity, but also the sustainability from an environmental perspective. I think, we've got to bring these conversations together, and we have to make impact investing the norm. So that this year's forum is a chance to do that. And as I said, I'm also working on a private members bill that will hopefully help the government to take a few of the next steps on some legislative changes as well. Lots of other stuff. One other big thing as a priority, I've been working for years to move our government forward on a sustainable public procurement as well. And that work is really impactful because if you think about these two big levers, the federal government has regulatory powers over the financial industry, which, just our 6 biggest banks and pension plans have over $7 trillion in assets under management. You then pivot and you look at the government of Canada spends about $20 billion every year on goods and services. This is a huge lever in the economy as one of the biggest purchasers of goods and services. If the government isn't putting the values that it has in its purchasing decision process, then I think there's an injustice that we're doing, and we're missing an opportunity to make impact as a federal government, and also send a clear signal out to entrepreneurs and businesses across the country that, hey, if you want to do business with the federal government, you've got to green your operations. You got to be serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You got to be real. And we've got to evaluate that. We have to send that strong signal in everything that we do. And to me, the procurement arm of the government and its purchasing power is a huge opportunity. And we are doing a lot, I'll say, like I sound like, but we need to do more. We need to mainstream it.
I love
so those
that.
are 3 big priorities. Yeah.
For sure. So, in my last question, how do you feel about the future of social innovation in Canada? What is your ultimate goal? What would success look like for you and your colleagues?
Good question. I mean, I think the key for me is when I talk to people on the ground in my community, I ask, do they have access to capital that they need to do the great thing? Like so all throughout my career working with social innovators, I've always found it, a kind of an injustice that many of our businesses that don't incorporate a social and environmental mission in their business seem to have better access to capital than the people who do. So that just seems fundamentally wrong to me, that the people who are advancing this country's interests, advancing the public interests, who are creating impact in creative ways, helping solve societal problems and bettering the country for everyone, they should have actually easier access to capital in a sense. So for me, my work is to try to tip the scales and say, okay, no, the people doing the work that's the most meaningful and most impactful should have the greatest access to capital. Why? Because it's in our best interest to do so. And I fundamentally believe that. So how do we create that? I mean, there's many facets of the conversation about, well, how do we achieve that? But I think we're doing great things so far, and we're ratcheting up the awareness. Part of it is members of parliament and senators who are the legislators in this country, they have to understand what we're talking about. And this conversation that we've been having as a sector and as a movement that I've been involved in for quite some time has been evolving quickly. And I think government, elected officials aren't always in the know. So part of it is raising that level of awareness and developing that conversation in a way that they can understand, and then ensuring that we can also help the public understand, because if we don't have public awareness, then the politicians aren't actually going to move forward with any meaningful changes and next steps. So I think it's a combination of things. It's another complex problem, is how to make federal policy change happen. But I think after 4 years, I'm really understanding the way things work and understanding how to help the sector navigate that and make some of the key steps forward. So I'm excited about that to no end. I literally have unlimited energy for this type of conversation, because it's why I got into politics. If someone said tomorrow, sorry, you can't do that work, I would probably say, okay, I'm out.
Well, I love to hear it. Your passion is very evident, and we definitely need that to see that in action. So, my last question: do you have any closing thoughts around any of, the sustainable finance or social finance, the ecosystems, the work that you're doing, or any calls to action for our community?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got to continue to advocate at the level of every community across the country. Like what I've learned in politics is that, you've got to have some internal champions inside the government, the governing party. You've also got to have, and they've got to work to have that cabinet buy-in and obviously prime minister buy-in eventually. And but you also really need a strong base of support outside of government that is kind of elevating and putting pressure on members of parliament and senators. And, I think the elected officials, especially the members of parliament across the country, need to be hearing from us. They need to be invited out to visit our entrepreneurs and constantly reminded of how impactful the work that we're doing at the federal level to unlock capital or to, help those social entrepreneurs gain access to federal contracts and compete for those contracts, like that, how impactful that work is. So I think that we've got to coordinate our efforts inside and outside of government. And, I've seen how effective that can be. Certainly, it led to the launch of the Social Finance Fund for sure, even though that took some time to get done. It's a really innovative step forward. It's a really big step forward. And I think it signals to the entire country just how much the federal government believes that there's value in what we're all doing. So, and again, I always put myself in the sector because I feel like I'm born and bred and raised in its social innovation sort of ecosystem, and it's what led me to where I am today. So I see it as I'm sort of wholly aligned with what the ecosystem is sort of hoping for and wanting. And that doesn't mean we all agree all of the time, because sometimes we disagree. And I think that's healthy for us to have debates and to talk about how we can improve things. There's many different asks in that future that I can see us making, from extending the investment readiness program for many years to come, which I think would be great, to, having a national advisory board for impact investing, participate in the global steering group. Those are just a couple, but there's many, many others. My advice, I guess, is to I think we need to do two things to really keep moving forward. One, we've got to demonstrate the impact by measuring it and telling the stories. As the capital flows from the social finance fund and impact investors are able to make those investments, I think we really need to demonstrate the impact. How do we do that? I think remains to be talked about, and like how we do it most effectively, I mean. But we need to tell those impact stories in a way that Canadians can understand, because I think there's still a gap, right? In terms of when I talk to my aunt or uncle or one of my, longtime friends who's not in this space, how do I explain and paint a picture, how do I share a vivid story about why this work matters so much? It's, from my experience, it's talking about those entrepreneurs and their journey and the impact that they're creating in communities across the country. Those stories are, are gold for us. Then I think we need to be able to roll up data and talk about impact and outcomes at a national level. And I think that that's really going to propel us forward, because it helps to educate the public and it helps to demonstrate the impact so that we can continue to amplify this work. Ultimately, it'd be great if all the Canadian pension plans were investing in our impact funds right across Canada. And I think there's good potential to see some of that movement in the coming years. So, but I hope we see a lot more of it.
For sure. It's so good to hear. And again, we want to really appreciate the remarkable leadership that you've taken and the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for that and being here for this interview today. We really appreciate it.
It's a privilege. It's an honor and a privilege. Honestly, it really is, to be an elected member of parliament and to get to do the work that I get to do. I feel humbled and privileged every single day that I get to do it on behalf of some of the people that are your listeners, and hopefully others that that value the work that I'm trying to do on behalf of others. So thanks very much. It's really great to talk to you. I feel blessed to have met you and have had the interview today.
Absolutely. Thank you once again for taking the time. I hope to see you again in the future for sure. And we just want to close the interview the way that we began, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on, as well as our ancestors and those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We want to acknowledge our elders and all community stewards whose shoulders we continue to stand on as we share and learn and build for our collective liberation. So once again, thank you, MP Turnbull, for taking the time to be here. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Take care. Thanks.